Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Town Manager Download, a podcast about local government and the town of Shrewsbury. I'm Kevin Mizikar, Town Manager of the town of Shrewsbury, and as always, I'm joined by Communications Coordinator Taylor Galusha. In today's episode, we're going to be joined by Seth Colby, Deputy Fire Chief and Shrewsbury's Emergency Management Director, to talk about emergency management in the town of Shrewsbury. How's everything going, Taylor?
Good. Back-to-back weeks of episodes.
Yep.
To make up for my my lapse of not being here, but
We're on a roll.
we're on a roll and coming off of the Thanksgiving weekend.
How was that?
It was good. We had more people at leftovers on Sunday than we did actual Thanksgiving, but I like being around my family. Got to see
Hopefully you
all
had a
my-
lot of leftovers.
We did.
That's
We
good.
actually made more food. Me and Mom made more green bean casserole to bring over. Saw my home friends, went to Barnes & Nobles, some good pizza places in Connecticut.
Nice.
So, yeah, good weekend all.
She made extra food for leftovers. Did you make it in advance or just for leftovers?
No, we made it just for leftovers. Like, we made it on Sunday.
Seems
It
like a rule.
is a little bit of
violation.
rule breaker, but I guess because there was new people there, then you got to let them have everything.
You can
'Cause
justify it if you want.
it all went. It was so good that we didn't have any left for leftovers. So,
That's good.
but how was yours?
It was good. I have an interesting story. We traveled to New Jersey to my wife's cousin's house.
Mm-hmm.
So we're a good distance away, over 200 miles. And I was literally standing at the table carving the turkey next to one of my wife's cousin's husband,
Okay.
co-workers.
Okay.
So we were talking, and I had previously spoken with her boyfriend earlier in the day, and he mentioned something about Central Massachusetts. So as I was standing next to her, I had asked her about Central Mass, and she's like, "Oh yeah, near Worcester." And I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And then she said, Northborough and Westborough, and I was like, "Yeah, I know that. I live in Sturbridge." And she's like, "Oh, really?" She's like, "I was a, Shrewsbury High School graduate." And I was like, "What?" I lost my
Such a
mind. I was
small
literally
world.
carving a turkey in New Jersey on Thanksgiving, standing next to
Shrewsbury
former
grad.
Shrewsbury resident. She lives in New Jersey now, but her father still lives here in Shrewsbury, which was really interesting.
Shout out to her dad.
That's right. So, yeah, I was like,
It's a lot
what is
better
going
than-
on in this world?
It's a lot better than my post-Thanksgiving events. I passed out at Quest, getting my blood work done.
Oh, that's not
So,
good.
yeah, that
Not
was
supposed
fun.
to do that.
Yours sounds a lot better than
Supposed to stay awake.
my dramatic life. So
Well, what's going on in the shrew since we're all back?
I know it's hard because we just did an episode. So the only one I wanted, or not only one, I'm sure there's other things we could highlight, but the police department's doing their annual Fill the Wagon event on December 9th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the police department.
That's an important one.
Yeah, it's a great cause. It helps support Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. They do it every year, and they're always really successful with it. So it's a good thing for people to have on their radar.
Good. So December 9th at 9 o'clock, 9 to noon,
Yep.
the new police station.
Yeah.
Great.
Great setting.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about emergency management and a lot of things related to that. And I'm happy to have Deputy Fire Chief Seth Colby, who serves as the town's emergency management director, come on the Town Manager Download and talk with us in a little bit. Local governments, interestingly enough, out of all three levels of government, generally speaking, we're the least resourced, but we have the most intimate knowledge and are best prepared to be the first line of defense against emergencies and preparing for disasters and responding, making the initial response and recovery efforts during those events. Hopefully we never get into those situations, but you see time and time again, whether they're weather-related or human-related things that go on in the world, it's those local governments that are obviously there already and are looked to respond. And we actually have that obligation, of course, primarily responding and protecting and serving the well-being of our residents. And it takes time to get those other entities in from the state or federal government, depending how big the matter is at hand. So there's a whole thoughtful approach and planning and system and training that local governments are not only responsible for, but go through to make sure that they're ready to respond. And it's a hard thing to do, and we look forward to talking to Seth about that, because there's plenty of challenges and disasters and emergency scenarios to prepare for, and you never know which one's going to arise. Right. So I think Shrewsbury does it really well, and probably do some of the most consistent training that I've seen in my career, which I'm really proud of. So yeah, it's an interesting aspect of the organization. It doesn't have its own dedicated department here in Shrewsbury, but we've kind of rethought our approach to emergency management over the last few years, and have Seth as the director, and actually I think are updating and maturing the plans that we have to make sure that we're ready for any situation that comes up. So Seth is supported by a deputy emergency management director and CERT coordinator, Sergeant David Fosher from the Shrewsbury Police Department serves in that role. So we have a good public safety collaboration when it comes to emergency management. And then we have the position that Taylor, you hold for public information officer, and helping coordinate our response to the press and et cetera.
My vest
during those events. You should have wore your vest. It's your favorite part of the position,
desk.
right?
I have 3.
In case the first 2 get dirty. But,
right, exactly.
and there's a number of opportunities for residents to also help us when it comes to a citizens emergency response team or CERT. So I'm sure Seth will talk about that and try to drum up support for that program, because they help us in a number of ways, not just for emergency management purposes, but any large events and gatherings.
They did like traffic management at the police community night event.
Yeah.
I remember seeing Bob Holland out there doing that.
That's right.
And I think they do Spirit of Shrewsbury as well. They help out with that too.
So. Yeah, any large event, we try to bring them in.
Awesome.
And it helps them being part of those situations and scenarios to prepare for things that, may be more out of the blue and bigger for us to deal with. So, we have a lot of opportunities for folks who may be interested in giving back to the community through those means. But, I'm looking forward to talking to Seth a little bit about how we do that type of training throughout the course of the year, who is involved in that, some of our more comprehensive planning documents and approaches that we use. I've been fortunate to participate in a multi-town event in the past few years. Weather events, of course, climate matters. Complicating those circumstances aren't going to stop the town boundaries. So we have to have close collaborative relationships with our communities within the region, and be able to muster and reallocate resources depending on the issues that each one is individually dealing with. So
it's hard to contain it to one department when it clearly touches all aspects, whether it's public works, police department, fire department, cross collaborative in the town, but also in the region too. So.
Right. Yeah, and kind of putting our traditional, really strong mutual aid relationships that are managed and kept mainly through the fire department, bringing those to another level and mustering those resources for the benefit of the region. Yep. I've had, up until a couple years ago, I was able to participate as an alternate member of the Homeland Security Council that provided a lot of resources for emergency management purposes, because those resources had to be shared among communities. So that's another resource that's available to communities for funding, and was started when Homeland Security was started after 9/11, and has brought a lot of police and fire training a lot closer and more local here into Shrewsbury and other local governments across the country. So I think this is one area we probably don't do too differently. Different areas of the country obviously prepare for different events, but this is probably quite similar to our local government colleagues around the country and perhaps around the world, depending on the circumstances that they find themselves in. So
Maybe the first time we've ever said that on this podcast.
it could be. It could be. So I'm sure we're one of the best when we do it. And I think it probably just makes the most sense to bring Deputy Fire Chief Seth Colby into the Town Manager Download and have a conversation with him about local emergency management. Take the opportunity to welcome Seth Colby, Deputy Fire Chief and Emergency Management Director, to the Town Manager Download. Welcome, Seth.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, Seth, we always like to start off with our guest and allow listeners to get to know them a little bit better. So, why don't you tell us how long you've been with the town and why you chose or maybe didn't choose this career path, how you ended up in your current role as Deputy Fire Chief, and talk a little bit about the Emergency Management Director role.
Sure. I guess you could say it chose me.
Okay.
You'll hear sometimes firefighters will say that it's a calling, it's not a job or an occupation. And I guess it's something that I had always wanted to do. Both my father and one of my grandfathers was a call firefighter here in Shrewsbury years ago, so I saw that growing up. It was something I wanted to do, so I got on the call department when I turned 18 and graduated high school. I got on in 94. 1994, and yeah, I did that, and I thought it was something that I wanted to do as a career, not just on call basis. So Shrewsbury is a civil service community, so I was in college, going to Worcester State College at the time before it was a university, and I took the civil service test, the statewide civil service test, never expecting to get a job. I figured it was most people you have to, unless you really top the list, especially in Shrewsbury where we only hire 1 or 2 a year. You really have to top the list. So I took it to see what the test was like, and if it was doable. And the summer in between my junior and senior year, I got called in for an interview, and I was hired that September. So I withdrew from Worcester State, came to work here full time in '97, and I continued my college part time, and I earned my associates, and then I went on and got my bachelor's, and then I worked my way up through and got a master's in public administration from Anna Maria. So I was still able to finish my school, but I took advantage of the opportunity to get the job, because if I passed it up, I didn't know if or when the opportunity would come up again.
So let's name names. Who was the chief at the time when you were hired? What was that process like?
It was George Duhamel.
Okay. Yep.
A lot different than what it's like now.
Sure.
He called me. I was working for a caterer at the time, and he called and he said, "Hey, you're up on the list. I want you to come in for an interview." And I said, "Okay." I said, when should I come in? And he's like, "Oh, are you available this afternoon?" So I get out of work in a couple hours. I said, "I've got to go home and get cleaned up." He's like, "Nope, just come how you are." So I showed up in shorts and a t-shirt. I was filthy. I said it was a caterer in a tent company, so I'd been setting up tents and everything, and sat in his office, and it was Richard Carney was the town manager at the time, and he basically went over what the job was and explained everything to me. And he asked me one question, which was, "Why do you want to be a firefighter?" That was the only question he asked me. He said, technically the town manager is the appointing authority, but he always has hired whoever I recommend. So that was the process.
Interesting.
Now we do it obviously much more involved, and we have HR involved, and the chief, and myself as the deputy. Sometimes we may have a captain and have an interview panel, and they go through the whole process and formal background checks and all of that. So it's come a long way since then.
And I don't want to stick on fire too long. We did have Chief Phone on the download a couple episodes ago. But Seth, one thing that strikes me that I don't want to forget about here, because I don't think we talked to Chief Vona about it, is the educational component. I think Shrewsbury is very fortunate that I'll say at this point the majority of our firefighters have at least a bachelor's degree, and many have master's degree. How do you think about that when you're looking at fire candidates and education? And a firefighter may not be something that kind of goes hand in glove when people think about the fire service as a career, but how do you think it benefits firefighters in the town?
Yeah, certainly. Years ago when I got on, there was very few. I think maybe 2 or 3 out of the 4 captains had some level of education, formal education. Chief of department had a bachelor's degree. That was the most that they had, a couple associate's degrees. And it was a lot of people, at the time, was a lot of people that became firefighters they worked in the trades. So they were carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and kind of hands-on people. And that has changed a lot for several reasons, but we're seeing a lot of the firefighters now that they're coming in with degrees, and it may have nothing to do with the fire service or emergency services. We have people that have degrees in accounting and all kinds of various things. We have history majors. We have all these different degrees, and I think the big thing with that is it shows. If I'm considering somebody as a candidate, it shows their motivation and dedication, shows that they put their mind to something and did it. So even if it's not specifically related to the fire service, I think it kind of speaks to their drive.
Interesting. So you're the deputy fire chief, second in command with regards to the fire department, and you're the emergency management director. So let's key in on the emergency management side of things for a little bit. So how long have you been in that role, and what are your responsibilities as the emergency management director?
Sure. It's been about 4 years that I've been. It was 19. It was July 1st, 2019, that I got a letter.
Timely.
I got a letter from you saying congratulations, you're now the emergency management director for.
We won't talk about that long interview process.
But no, this is to my knowledge, I'm the first one in the fire department to have that role. Prior to that, it's bounced around, and there's been somebody in the manager's office that's done it. At one point, we had somebody in the school department that's done it. It's always been a second. I don't want to say tertiary job, because that kind of takes something away from it, because it is a very important role. But it's always been somebody's second function, dual role, exactly. And that's the case in most communities. Shrewsbury is certainly not unique in that, unless you're in a larger city that has a dedicated emergency management department. Fire chiefs are very common. I think if you were to look at the demographics across the emergency managers in Massachusetts, you would see that the largest percentage of them are fire chiefs that take that on as a second role. So that's pretty common. So yeah, I stepped in and a lot of fire service experience at that point, over 20 years of fire service experience, but I had never really been involved with the emergency management side of it. And I think you talked a little bit about it before, and Taylor said it, where emergency management is a lot of coordination and a lot of collaboration, and it's all behind the scenes stuff that the average person doesn't see. And I was used to being the one that jumped on the truck and responded to calls and did all that. And even as an officer, even when I was a captain in the fire department, it was still all kind of emergency response based. It wasn't all the planning for potential future disasters and problems.
So, I guess it goes without saying, obvious to me, it makes a lot of sense to, have a very senior level leader within the organization be responsible for emergency management. It enables you to build those relationships and muster resources and pull people together to not only put the plans in place, but also have the respect, if there's this event or a situation that comes up, to be the leader in that scenario, and something that we look to. And, we all can say it, knock on wood, thankfully we haven't had to deal with, really anything more challenging than preparing for some winter storms or hurricanes recently. But we all know at kind of any given moment at any given time, hopefully not weather related, but these things can arise that we all have to respond through. So let's start with the preparedness side. How do what plans do we have in place, and what training do you recommend, and kind of how do you go through putting the framework in place that kind of then leads to be able to take action if an event comes up?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of the things with emergency management, is that the vast majority of the work is actually on what they refer to blue sky days, right? And that's what it is. It's planning for either a planned event or a potential storm or disaster, that whether it be natural or man-made, that could occur. So absolutely, and Taylor plays a big role as the PIO in that, and a big part of that is getting public service announcements out to the community, to our residents, to our business partners and businesses in the community, and how do we want them to respond? So for example, a rainstorm. I was on my way in this morning, and the street sweepers were out, right? Because they're sweeping. I know that's part of the stormwater management, but they also have to keep them clear, because when it rains, especially in the fall, the leaves are going to plug that up. So sending out messages to the community saying, hey, clean out your storm drain, your catch basin, because no matter how good the town is, and the highway department is fantastic at keeping them clear and keeping the roads open, but there's just so many of them that it's not practical, especially this time of year when they go down, they sweep the street, and an hour later the leaves are back on the street.
Right.
So just getting messaging out like that, because that may prevent it may not do anything to the person that has that drain in front of their house, but when the water doesn't go down that drain, maybe 3 houses down, their neighbor, now their basement just flooded out because the water all diverted to there. So messaging like that, messaging to shovel out the hydrants after a snowstorm, reminders to check on your neighbors if you have elderly neighbors or disabled neighbors. Like you had mentioned at the beginning, right? Everything starts. We have to be self-sufficient. So, they say every disaster starts locally and it ends locally, which is true. So it's important to get those kind of messages out, to the community. As far as planning in advance, really there's kind of 2 different ways we do it. Is one, we take an approach of planning for any anticipated hazards that we could get. So that's where we have what's referred to as a SEMP, which is a community emergency response plan. And that has, I'll say, any likely event that could happen, whether it be a natural weather event, a hazardous materials event, right? We don't have any rail that comes through town, but we have an awful lot of highway with 290 and Route 20, a lot of truck traffic that comes up through town. An overturned tanker or something of that nature could turn into a major event for us, depending on what it's carrying. It could lead to evacuations and all kinds of things. So, we plan for all those types of events, and we have response plans for that, as far as which department is going to take on what role, who the contact people are, who's responsible. So it needs to be updated, really, at least annually, as positions change and people get promoted or retire and new people come into the organization. So that's kind of the broad approach to planning that we would do well in advance of an event. And then we also look at planning if we anticipate something happening. So again, we're coming up on the winter now. If they're forecasting a blizzard, we'll start looking at that almost a week out when we see that initial initial weather report. And at that point, we're not really doing much except for tracking it and keeping tabs on the weather reports. And then as it starts to get closer and we get a better idea, that's when we bring together the departments that would be most impacted by it, and we'll have a coordination meeting. Really, like I said, you can sum up emergency management with one or two words. It would be probably coordination and collaboration. Right? It's coordinating all the different departments and agencies, and then collaborating and knowing who can I call when we need resources.
Yeah, and those events or those pre-event meetings that we've had in the past, right? We've had them recently when there was I think it was not this past summer, but the summer before, there was potential for a hurricane, so we got together on that a couple times. Why don't you talk about how we do that, what you do at those meetings? I know it's informal to us, but a little bit of insight into who's there and how the meetings are run.
Sure. Yeah, so we invite, again, kind of the departments that are going to be affected by it. And it's a pretty broad, we kind of paint it with a broad brush as far as who's involved. And a lot of times there's departments that somebody from the outside might be like, well, why are they really here? But they could end up playing a critical role in it. So with regards to, that was a storm, a potential hurricane to come in. So there's the obvious of police and fire and DPW with the highway department, Selco for, right, we worry about down trees and down power lines and that kind of stuff. But we also may bring in other departments. So for example, when there's been heat waves, we've got multiple days of high heat, what we'll do is we'll reach out to the library and confirm their hours, and we'll put out public service announcements and say, we have it's a kind of an informal cooling center where these are the hours the library's open, everybody's welcome, there's plenty of public spaces, you can come in and cool down. So that's pretty common. But like I said, there's a thing where you say, well, what do you need the library here for? But really everybody plays a role, and everybody's involved. Water department, well, what happens if we lose power for an extended period of time? They have backup generators, but obviously water supply is a concern, and sewer pump stations. That's if that infrastructure is impaired, that can lead to significant problems.
Right. So one of the things that I know you orchestrate once or twice a year, mainly here just in town, but sometimes we go outside of town as well and join with other communities, are various training and tabletop exercises that we go through. So why don't you talk about how you utilize those in emergency management preparedness and the things that might be seen if someone was in the room with us there?
Sure. So we try to do at least two meetings, whether you call them meetings, drills, tabletop exercises. It kind of depends. Sometimes there'll be more of a planning meeting as far as how can we address a potential issue, or we may want to exercise a plan that we have. So I mentioned we have the SEMP has just been updated recently. We're preparing to present that to the select board at a December select board meeting for their official sign off and approval on it. So that's something that then we could come up with a scenario and have an exercise that plan and make sure that it works, and see if there's anything that we need to change in there. An example of one that we had done this past year was we did a tabletop exercise on the water distribution system. So that's all run by computers and so on. So the scenario was that somebody had hacked into the computer system, and if this happened and they adjust all the chemical levels and contaminate all of our drinking water, how can we respond? That was a great one because, again, it brought in a whole bunch of departments that normally wouldn't be front and center on an emergency management drill. The water department, they always play an important role, but they're not typically the focus of this. So it was a great opportunity to bring them in. They brought in some their private consulting and engineering company. They were in to say, to basically be a sounding board and say, well, can we do this? Can we do that? How would this work? We talked about if this happens, and I had invited our MEMA rep. We have a local coordinator, Kevin Filchek, who's great to work with. He had come in with some of the folks from MEMA to observe and be able to give feedback and their thoughts on it. One of the topics that came up for discussion during the drill was, if this happened and we need to get drinking water out to a community of this size, how are we going to do it? And, oh, well, they'll go to the grocery store and buy it. And it's like, well, how much water do they really have in a grocery store? The first 50 people that go there are going to clean them out, and that'll be the end of that. So I asked Kevin from MEMA, and I said, well, could FEMA has water, right? We could get that. He's like, well, you can, but it's going to take 2 days to get it here, because it's in one of their strategic locations.
Yeah.
And what FEMA will do is they'll relocate assets if they know something's happening. So if a hurricane is going to hit down south, they'll relocate assets and move them to outside the direct impact zone, but get them closer to where they need. But something like this that's not anticipated, we're on our own. So as a result of doing that, we were able to go and get set up as a customer for a local distribution company that basically promised us we could get you a 53-foot trailer full of drinking water within a couple hours. If you need it. And we're all set up because we did all the paperwork, we established a relationship, and now it's just a matter of a simple phone call to say, we need a truckload of water here. Had we not done that drill, not had that discussion, and something ever happened, we would have been like, okay, now where are we going to get water? And we'd be trying to scramble. So that's really the advantage of doing these and getting everybody's minds together and asking questions, and then
kind of lets you do all the brainstorming, bouncing off each other for solutions ahead of time. So when you go into something, you already have it in place.
Absolutely. Yep.
I'll try to think of some weird ones.
Yeah,
that was a particularly good one, and I know that it was a little bit different too, because I think you had done some planning work with the DPW and water and sewer superintendent, but not everyone knew the scenario when they walked into the room, so you're able to kind of appropriately test, leaders within the organization, within water and sewer, to see how they would respond and what knowledge they had of the system. Not to shame anyone, but that exact scenario has happened in other parts of the country. So, and we're all a little bit more vulnerable, although we do a good job with cybersecurity. You never know when something like that could happen. So that was
it could be something to it. It doesn't even have to be
malicious.
Yeah. It could be an equipment malfunction. It could be a whole host of things. So.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about other partners that we use. Seth, I'll pull back. So you mentioned MEMA and FEMA, so the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. I don't know what the A stands for.
Agency.
Yeah. And FEMA is the federal equivalent. So how, as emergency management director, how and when do you interact with them in a non-emergency scenario and then an emergency scenario?
Quite a bit, actually, with MEMA. FEMA a lot less often, but MEMA is, I wouldn't say weekly necessarily, but quite often. So every community in the state has a local coordinator, and ours is Kevin Filchek. So like I said, I either meet with him or have a phone conversation quite often. I was actually scheduled to have one last Wednesday. He was coming out to meet with me at 1 o'clock, and we ended up at a fire that afternoon. At Table Talk Pies, which the day before Thanksgiving was probably the worst day of the year to have a fire at Table Talk Pies. So we've rescheduled that for this coming week. But no, we discuss things quite a bit. They have quarterly meetings throughout the state for all the emergency management directors. So that's every 3 months or so they have those meetings. They said we're on the phone a lot. We review plans a lot, and then just in general what was it, about a month ago when Leominster had the severe flooding that they had there, and they drew on all the mutual aid from around them, and we were far enough away that we didn't get involved with that, but MEMA called me up at 4:00 that morning because they had on their resource list that Shrewsbury has 2 signboards, highway signboards that are available. And because it was 4:00 in the morning, there was obviously nobody in the office. So I got the call. And then I turned around and woke up Nick over at Highway Division, and he got someone in and got it sent right up to Leominster. And so that's really the way the system is designed to work. It's just the collaboration and relationships. Had that position with Kevin not worked, I don't know who the state, who they would have got a hold of it. 4:00 in the morning.
Sure. Yeah.
So they're really good. They do. There's grant opportunities through them. We're working on a grant right now. It's the EMPG grant, which is Emergency Management Performance Grant. That comes out annually. It's actually funneled down from FEMA, from the federal government, through MEMA, and then they distribute it out to the local communities. So we're working on putting that together now for that. And then there's a lot of other agencies that we work with as well. So MEMA is great. They can coordinate resources. They have what's called WebEOC, which is an online platform that we can go and we can request resources right through that. And we can see what other communities have going on for situational awareness. And that's really good when there's storms and stuff. We can kind of get an idea on what's going on around us and monitor that. We also work with a lot of other, I've mentioned other town departments a lot, but we work with other agencies, whether they are governmental or non-governmental agencies, volunteer organizations. Eversource provides natural gas in town. So same thing, that's obviously a significant concern and hazard there. So we work with them fairly routinely when a contractor digs up a gas line or something like that. But we also, again, we have relationships with them. We have meeting and trainings with them. They have a whole emergency plan that they send us every year on how they would respond, because there's 2 sides to it. There's obviously a gas leak, which is a hazard, but an interruption in gas service in the winter, and now nobody has heat. That creates another whole problem. So we work closely with them. A lot of volunteer organizations, the American Red Cross, the Reserve Medical Corps. They're great. If we ever have to open a shelter or anything, they'll come and give us some medical professionals. There's the CMR DART, which is Central Mass Regional Animal
Something.
Animal Disaster Response team, and they'll come and same thing. They'll provide. They'll help us out if we have to open a shelter, because if in Massachusetts any shelter has to, if you open a people shelter, you have to have a pet shelter to go along with it, and that's in contrast to what it used to be years ago. And actually we had it where if we opened a shelter, it was not open to pets because there was the whole thing of allergies, or what if you have a vicious dog or this or that. And the state has actually changed it now, and they actually have laws on the books that if we open a shelter, we have to accommodate cats and dogs and their pets. So there's a lot of agencies that we work with.
So if we move into an emergency response situation, the hub of that really is an emergency operations center and EOC. So what is an EOC, Seth, and what would it look like if someone was inside there with you? Who's in there, and what is their responsibility?
Sure. So an EOC, an Emergency Operations Center, we just relocated it. So we've actually got a couple options for it. So for years it's been the selectmen's room at town hall, and we had some radios that we had a closet dedicated to store. We had some extra phones, some radios, and we have what's referred to as a cold EOC, which means we have a space for it, but it's not set up. If it was a warm EOC, it would all be set up 24 hours a day, around the clock. We have a dual purpose room, which is what most communities have. Most communities can't dedicate a room the size of the selectmen's room to just sit there, day in and day out and not be utilized. So we would get that set up, and that's something that if we anticipate a storm coming, we would set it up ahead of time so it's ready to go. And we may or may not use it, but at least it's there. We've got the phones are out with all the various phone extensions. We have the radios that come in so that we can talk directly to MEMA at the state. We can talk on police, fire, and so on. And then that would be the various departments would come in, as well as other agencies. So the scenario we were just talking about, you may have somebody from Eversource may be there, somebody from Selco, Highway, police, fire. And the whole idea is to be able to collaborate and come up with a plan together. All those departments and agencies that I just mentioned, they all have a role, but they're all different roles. So in the event, take a blizzard, Highway Division is concerned with keeping the roads open. Selco is concerned with trying to restore power. Fire Department is maybe concerned if we've got a lot of power outages that people are going to use generators inside their buildings. We're worried about carbon monoxide poisoning. Everybody has their different concerns. By putting all the key players from each department and each agency into one location, they're able to take the situation as it changes and best react to it and allocate resources and come up with a plan. So for that scenario, let's say we lose power at the nursing home or one of the assisted living facilities. Because everybody's together, we can work on that, and somebody from the health department could maybe say, hey, we need to get power to this area restored. That needs to be a priority because we have a lot of assisted living facilities or something that's there, or the nursing home is there and their backup generator didn't start. So they have no power and they have people on vents and so on. So now you can collaborate, and Selco can prioritize that area for restoration. DPW could divert a plow over to open up the road so that Selco could get there. And everybody can kind of work together, whereas if all the departments just work out of their own offices, you don't get the big picture.
Right.
Everybody's kind of focused on what they think, but you don't get the whole, you're not able to prioritize it.
Great. Couple other areas. So you had mentioned shelters. So what is the town's obligation and role in establishing a shelter if one is necessary?
So we're in pretty good shape right now. We're actually in a lot better shape than a lot of communities. Okay. When I took over the role as emergency management director, that was kind of one of the things I had on my list that I didn't really know a heck of a lot about. I knew we had equipment. We've got a trailer full of cots and blankets and other stuff. But I really didn't know how that was going to work. I didn't know who was going to set it up. I didn't know who was going to run it. And it turns out really nobody was. We had kind of a turnover in staff and everything. And the more research I did and took the shelter class through MEMA, took the shelter class through the American Red Cross, found out that we were actually the norm, that's pretty common because it's not something that we do here in New England is open a shelter often. So that's what most communities, if they had anything, they had some stuff in a closet somewhere and didn't really have a plan on who was going to do it. So we actually advertised for somebody to volunteer as a shelter coordinator, and we had Lori Jones stepped up a couple of years back, and she's taken all the training and inventoried everything and worked on our plans and We've worked with the Red Cross, and they've actually come in and kind of credentialed our shelter locations now, so that that they're recognized locations. So our primary shelter location would be Oak Middle School, in the gym there, and we have a bunch of cots and blankets and stuff in a storage room there. We also have a 16-foot trailer full of cots and blankets and other supplies, medical supplies and stuff that would go to Oak Middle School if we were going to open it there. If Oak Middle School was involved in whatever the problem was, and we had to go somewhere else, we could take that trailer and we could relocate a shelter and have it open pretty quick. And we've got relationships with the Red Cross that they would come and help staff it, as well as the Reserve Medical Corps. They would come and help, like I said, do the medical evaluations and all of that. And we would draw on our one group that we haven't talked about yet is our CERT team, our Community Emergency Response Team. So that's a group of volunteers. I think you and Taylor had spoken about it a little bit, where they've helped out with the National Night Out, and they've helped out with Spirit of Shrewsbury in the past, and the parades and everything. And they're a great group, and we're always looking for more volunteers to get involved with that. But yeah, they're a great group, so we'd kind of lean on them to help staff it, because the reality is we need volunteers. I mean, emergency management in any community needs volunteers. You just don't have the staff to be able to open a shelter, because we would have to pull them from all the other departments, and then they're not going to be able to take care of their tasks that they have. So, but no, we have a plan. We've exercised it. We did a drill where we set up, did a partial setup at Oak Middle School. We had about 30 volunteers come from surrounding communities. And again, it was a combination of CERT teams, American Red Cross, CMR DART, Reserve Medical Corps, and they all they came in, and it was a great opportunity to meet people, if nothing else, make some connections, and
Right.
yeah. But we're I say that we have about 125 person capacity, so which is common. So we have a town of 40,000 people, and we can put 125 of them in shelters. But that's pretty common. I think what we would do very well at, and our drill was actually a scenario in a housing authority building, and we had to relocate all of those people, and we could do that if we had a major, we keep talking about hurricanes and blizzards, but tornadoes, I guess, are becoming more and more a reality here as well. If we had a large scale incident like that, what would happen is the state and the Red Cross, they'd be looking at regional shelters, and we would go in with other towns, and it maybe in Worcester or Marlborough or wherever it is. And I mean, regionalization is really I think going to be the future of all of this stuff. We're really doing it now. We're just not using the term regionalized. We're calling it mutual aid or other terms, but it really is essentially regionalization.
So before I get to my last question, I think we'd be remiss to skip over COVID-19 as an emergency management response.
We can't skip that?
Seth, you did an amazing job for the town and coordinated things on the front line, literally doing COVID tests of town staff and others, and things beyond that, but also a lot behind the scenes and securing grant funding and making sure the town had financial resources and test kits and things like that. So not all emergencies are fast moving as we saw from COVID-19. So why don't you take, maybe just 2 or 3 minutes and talk about your interactions with the state and maybe FEMA briefly on COVID. I know it's hard to sum up a 3 or 4 year pandemic in a couple minutes, but what did you learn from that, I guess, from an emergency management standpoint?
So that happened, I was about 9 months into being emergency management director. So I was still trying to figure things out and take classes, which then all of a sudden were no longer able to happen. But
Yeah.
no, I think honestly, I think my big takeaway was just the collaboration and how well everybody worked together, and how much people and departments and agencies did that really wasn't their responsibility, or they wouldn't have ever thought would have been their responsibility. And I don't think I ever heard anybody say, "Well, that's not my job." You know, that's not my problem. Everybody was great. A lot of collaboration through the manager's office and the Regional Health Alliance, right, with Central Mass Regional Health Alliance, Worcester Health. They were great. And we did, we opened up some clinics at the fire station. We used the training room, and they came in, and Council on Aging, another great. They helped with transportation. They'd pick up one person at a time to get them where they needed to be, helping get food out to people that couldn't go out, whether because they were physically shut-ins prior to this, or they had they were immunocompromised and just couldn't risk exposure. And everybody really stepped up. So the library, the Council on Aging, everybody kind of stepped in on these roles. Public facilities did stuff to be able to keep the public offices going. They put up barriers and did all kinds of stuff. So everybody really stepped up. And then my biggest stress on the whole thing was, like you said, was funding, and kind of again the behind the scenes part. And so we put in a request for public assistance, an RPA request for public assistance through FEMA. I had never done that before. The town has done it for large storms, snowstorms and stuff, where they've been able to recoup some of the money. But the federal government said that this is eligible for this. So I did all these webinars and everything, and found out that I was totally behind where I should be, with regards to having copies of all the invoices and everything. And come to find out that our accounting department had done phenomenal work, and they had everything categorized. They had scanned everything in. They were all in Google Docs. And when I found out, I was like, I had a sigh of relief. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. I thought I was going to be done on this one. But no, we were able to get back over $1 million in what they considered direct protective measures.
Right.
So anything that was to protect our workers and the community against the spread of COVID-19. And that was from the municipal departments, as well as some stuff from the school side. A lot of the additional sanitizing of buses and school buildings and the barriers and all that stuff we were able to submit. But to the point where I had to break things down. I was literally submitting for nuts and bolts that had been bought to
Put
as a barrier. Yeah. They're very particular on how they wanted it, but it was a good learning experience. And like I said, it was great working with the accounting office, and that was before Mary Thompson had retired, and she was so helpful, so good to work with. And again, it was just a collaborative effort where multiple departments working together, had to get all the records from public facilities and narratives to justify it. So that's really my biggest takeaway. I think was just how well everybody worked together and how everybody pitched in and did what they could.
Great. So we always want to put residents in the best situation, and Seth, you've done a lot to plan and evolve emergency management over the relatively short amount of time that you've been in the role. I guess my final question is, what can residents do to help be prepared in an emergency situation? Like, what steps could they take today if they were interested?
Sure. If they go on the town's website under emergency management, there are a bunch of links and things that they can do to create emergency kits and what they should do to take care of their families and so on. Certainly, if they want to get more involved, I would encourage them. Again, they can go online or contact David Fosher at the police department and do an application to join the CERT team. We're always looking for new members there, and that's a great way to help out their neighbors and communities. Like I said, Taylor does a great job.
Like Code Red.
Yep.
Also off the emergency management page, it's used for more like urgent messaging, but our town website also does like urgent updates and social media. So try to put it out everywhere we can, that we can at least get one person that's aware of like everything that's going on.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, we try to send out stuff in advance to get people prepared, and really just look out for each other, look out for your family, look out for if you have neighbors that are elderly or shut in, to check in on them and make sure they're all that they're good. Everybody has to be. I said all emergencies start local and end local, and they really start with the individual. And then, it's going to take time before we can get to everybody's house to be able to help them. And then same thing, if we need help, it takes time for the state to come in. It takes time for FEMA to come in. So really just look out for each other. And
Great.
Take care of each other.
Exactly.
So that leads us to one of my favorite segments of the show, which is the best, right? We strive to be the best local government in the world. And Seth, you're certainly leading emergency management and the fire department in that endeavor on a day-to-day basis. And there's a lot of competing interests that you see and have to balance on a day-to-day basis. But what would you say the best part of your average workday is?
I think it's seeing the firefighters succeed in their jobs and in their roles. They do a lot of training, pretty much every shift. They're training on some topic, and I think just to see them. And last week I had the opportunity to go and see them in action and be very professional at a building fire in a large commercial building. Fortunately, that does not happen every day. That's a good thing. But to just see their professionalism and how they handled it, minimized damage to the business and everything, so that they could get reopened as soon as possible. But I see it on a daily basis when they go on a medical call, or they go on an odor investigation at somebody's house, or a carbon monoxide incident, and just to see them and how they help the residents and they help the community to make the situation better.
Great. All right, Taylor, this is your one question of the day.
Thank you.
What's the best part of your average day at work? Whatever an average day is.
I don't have average days. Probably my coworkers. I love everyone that I work with. We have a good time, get a lot done, but they make coming to work every day exciting, and I'm happy to be in town hall with all of them. So
Nice.
Whether they're my desk mates that sit in the same office as me, or basically anyone in the building, I feel like they just make Shrewsbury Town Hall a good place to be, and a police department, fire department when I make it over there. But it's not that often, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it.
That's good. Good. I think for me, it's probably I enjoy, in a positive, functional way, challenging people, right? Like getting the best out of everyone. You kind of both talked about working with others, but really making sure we ask the right questions and making sure that we truly are getting kind of the best product out of everyone before we settle on a solution or an approach or an answer that we're digging deep to make sure that we have all of our bases covered. So, well, this has been great. Seth, it's been wonderful to have you here, and appreciate the insight that you're able to provide and give us a behind-the-scenes look at all the planning work and the functional aspects of emergency management. This has been another great conversation on the Town Manager Download. Thanks for coming. We appreciate your time. Just a reminder to our listeners, if you have a question or a comment, you can reach us at tmdownload@shrewsburyma.gov. So on behalf of Taylor Galusha, I'm Kevin Mizikar. Thank you for listening.